I keep telling you that these scriptures are much more than literal, and very often they're just wonderful stories that teach so much. And quite frankly, I think Jesus knew it. He was a teacher, he was a storyteller. And nothing, I think, pulls us in to learning more than a story, because the details and things that are left out attract us, and they make questions pop up in our mind. So here we have two stories about two women. There's a lot of lust in these stories. There's a lot of evil going on in these stories. There's condemnation. There's even condemnation up to the point of wanting to put two women to death. It's extraordinary, provocative, but wow, what goes on here. Now, I insisted that we had the longer story, the longer version, because there's just a lot more lust and delight in it. This innocent woman is accused because of two dirty old men. Two dirty old men. And they're willing to see a woman put to death because they didn't get their way. And worst of all, these were two judges. These were respected, honorable, supposedly, men of the community. And people would respect their judgments and be willing to put someone to death. And they twisted it. It made me think of the scripture, to whom more is given, more is expected. And they should have been just and good. Now, lust is a part of life, and desire and pleasure is a part of life. What turns desire and pleasure into lust? And I think it is when people drop their values, they forget that people are people, they're children of God. And when they would allow their pleasure and desires to supersede the value of a person, then we start getting into true evil. And when they would permit their desires and pleasure, which are not sinful, desires and pleasures in themselves are not simple, it's what we do with them. And if it was going to be a decision killer because we couldn't get some sex out of her, wow, that's extraordinary. And in the gospel, it's not a whole bunch different than that. You see, there's these little details like, where's the man? Why wasn't he dragged before the crowd to be stoned to death? Just the woman. Wow. That should incense all the women here. I'm just giving the message. I'm not the bad one here. But the woman's brought there. And really, was it because they found a prostitute or found a woman who was committing adultery? I don't think so. I think it was clear what it said. They were using this opportunity as a test case to catch Jesus, to trap him. So they brought the woman, dragged her from the bed. I'm assuming she was naked. Maybe they just threw a cloth around her, but it was the height. They dragged this woman there, this prostitute, and they stated their case. And they put it all on the law of Moses. Now, the law of Moses for them, for the Jews, was huge. And they were believing that Jesus couldn't get out of this. And then the extraordinary happened in such a simple way. Now, there's no detail in this that really helps us. We have to imagine. And I never thought of this until I read it from a commentator, Barclay, many, many years ago, almost 50 years ago when I was in scripture classes. They said, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says that she should be condemned to death by stoning her to death. What do you say, Jesus? What do you say? Aha. And they waited, and he said nothing. He said nothing. But he went down and did something, scribbling, writing in the dirt. Now, the gospel doesn't tell us what he wrote. And there's no reaction yet. So maybe he was just scribbling just to draw their attention, because they asked him a question. What do you say? But he said nothing. So then he stood up, and what he did say was this: the one who is without sin, you throw the first stone. Ooh. And then he bent down and began to write again. Now this becomes the question, what was he writing? Because whatever he was writing, the effect was one by one, starting with the oldest, all the way down to the youngest, every one of his accusers, every one of his trappers, every one of those who was trying to catch him, walked away in silence. I'm going to assume with their head bowed. They're lost. They're lost. And Jesus won again. Barclay says he began to write sins that each one identified, and he trapped them. He caught them by their own sinfulness. It's a pretty good conclusion, but at any rate, every one of them walked away. And then, the whole point of this story and the beauty of the story, once again, Jesus became the healer. Jesus became the source of grace. Jesus became the one that invited the woman to something more. Now that's extraordinary. And the real value of this story is for us. Would he do the same? Does he do the same? Does Jesus just look to our good actions? Oh, they're all praying the rosary today. Oh, look, they all came to Mass today. All of which is good. Or does he want to grab us right in the midst of our sin, our brokenness, our weakness, our craziness, our non-desired mindsets that say, I don't want any more. I'm content with being who I am and what I am. Does he want to reach into that and say, now, who is there to condemn you? Because let's face it, every one of us here has somebody who doesn't like us or who wants to condemn us, really. Let's face it. And sometimes they're the people closest to us, our own kids, our brothers and sisters, people that, our parishioners, whatever. But Jesus comes to the rescue. He extends his hand and he really wishes, I think, to draw us out of that way of living, oftentimes, alone, so that he can bring us more life. And so today, I think the lesson is, let him in. Let him in. Jesus wants to restore us and make us even more. Please stand.